G'day everyone, and welcome to another video. So last year, 2025 that is, for various reasons we had to do some reorganisation of our house here. And the reason I mention that is, previously I'd been playing music in, let's call it room A, and as part of this reshuffle I was required to move all my audio gear into room B. And the difference between that rooms isn't huge. This one might be a square metre bigger or something like that. But morphology-wise, the shape and the layout is much better than it was. And it also sounds much better. So I'm a pretty happy chappy. By the way, don't be alarmed. This isn't going to be some kind of I'm rebuilding my home studio rabbit hole video or something like that. For one, I'm not the world's expert on that topic. I'm not going to pretend to be. And two, it seems that there is quite a few YouTube channels doing that topic at the moment. And see what happens. I might even put a few of those in the description below. So, when I committed to this move, a few things occurred to me. And by a few, I mean like 1,000. But one of the big ones was that I needed more space to hang my guitars. And by more space, I mean more efficient usage of the space. And you can see here the previous wall and how I used the absolutely excellent Hercules in-wall hangers. You can see here how I offset them on the wall, long, short. And that was great as a display, but it was pretty limited to how many axes could be up there at one time. I also say excellent with a grain of salt because one of them came crashing down, as I showed in another of my videos. That was 100% my failure though unknowingly at the time. And that got me thinking. I really love and prefer the way that things are done in most guitar shops, with the nice walls and the arm hangers coming out and all that kind of thing. And I said, I wonder what it would take to do that here. So bam, down the rabbit hole I went, and pretty classic Don obsessive researching job to look at what the options are and potentially what one could be for myself. And I found three main categories. The first being the big players, the big US brands. The second being some Chinese Amazon equivalents. And the third being DIY. But irrespective, pretty much all the solutions, whether purchased or DIY, they all require some sort of slat wall solution. And curiously enough, I didn't find any good information or sources, even here on YouTube, on the DIY side of things of creating guitar hangers. So if anyone does know of any good sources, then put them down in the comments and I'll add them to the description links as well. So I did some detailed comparisons and some rough budgets, and to my surprise, it didn't seem to matter which direction I went. In order to achieve my particular goals here, I ended up always with about the same number. And for those of you who are curious, it turns out to be about $1,000 Aussie. Unsurprisingly, the Chinese Amazon options were the cheapest solution, but given you'd have to buy sight unseen, and also given my little falling off the wall fiasco, I wasn't feeling the cheapest option vibe. Also unsurprisingly is that the more expensive option comes from the big US brands. They are the industry standard after all. But along with that comes the quality, the tutorials, and of course the never-ending product affirming testimonials all over the internet. And while I remember, there's a video from years ago with some guys espousing the quality and the beauty of the Diamond Life guitar hanger product, and that video is hilarious, so I recommend you check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. But to be honest, my biggest motivator here, and is on just about everything, is to find the solution that creates the least amount of drama and the least amount of fuss for myself. And I thought because this is going to be a long-term solution and I wanted the material to be trustworthy and I wanted quality and blah, 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 then the big US options seemed like the obvious choice. And I really did try to make it work. And this is where the surprise factor comes in. It was just frustratingly difficult to actually source, let alone order, some of these US-based products. And that's quite simply because I'm outside the US. And that was before the tariffs or any of that nonsense. I mean, it's possible, but it's even possible to order some of the products on Amazon, and I'll show some of that on the screen here. But the options are very limited, and it seems quite a bit sketchy. Then I started considering the time it takes to ship, and the likelihood of something going wrong in transit, and delays, and tariffs, as I mentioned already. Or worse, it gets caught in our bureaucracy-riddled customs process that's developed in my country in the last 10 or 15 years. And I use the word bureaucracy very loosely there to be politically correct today, but really I mean another word. Let alone the quarantine issues of bringing things into the country, especially if there's wood involved. For the record, I'm not criticising that part. There's any number of examples, even recent. I can show you one here that exalt the value of that process. Our quarantine systems are critical, and unlike customs, I'm super proud of that part of our country's machinery. Anyway, it was too much struggle for diminishing returns. So I went back to my original inspiration, and seems pretty obvious now, but all I did is I went to a couple of the local guitar shops here and asked what they did. But even that ended up being not quite so simple. One of the shops I went to, who will remain anonymous, but they recently went through some refurbishment. Well, the employees there basically didn't know anything or were just unwilling to help in general. I don't know, it was weird, and I'm going to leave it there. Fortunately for me, several of the other stores couldn't help me enough. In fact, the employee at one of them, he actually went and asked all the management what they had done when they built the store and came back with a hope of different solutions, including the best ones, and then went on to help me order some parts and everything. So that was a major win, and I thank that person wholeheartedly. So I put together a plan and I went at it. By the way, look, I'm not pretending to be Bob the Builder here. I'm definitely not going to be giving any definitive advice on construction practicalities, but I did do a lot of research and planning, and if some of the hints that I took from my own work can help you out, then I'm glad of that. But this is all stuff that's relevant to my situation and may or may not be relevant to yours. Step 1 is planning and measuring. The planning, I'll leave to you. Measuring, as the old saying goes, if you measure twice, then you only have to do something once. And that goes in line with a few hints that I've got on this topic. And the first one is to do with length. So most of these slat wall based units, and that's both the fancy online ordered ones and the DIY variety, they usually come in 1 meter or 3 feet in the old language, or 3 times that. And you can see this one behind me, that's 3 meters wide, and fortunately my wall is just about 4 meters wide, so fits in there perfectly. So keep that one in mind. The second item in the equation is height, and that is both the height of the slat wall slabs, which I'll leave to you to work out, but also a key component in the equation is the height of the top of the hanger to the ceiling. And I made this mistake many years ago when I was a teenager in a previous house. Then, unbelievably, I kind of did it again about 2 years ago in the previous room that I mentioned. To be fair, it works well with the guitars I had at the time, but I didn't take into consideration the potential size of headstocks of future guitars. So what I was talking about there was the height of the headstocks of your guitars. And typically headstocks are about 20 centimeters long. However, a few recent experiences I've had, I'm going to give you some practical examples of where that might be inadequate. Here we have my Solar, and you can look at the specs there, and one of my Ormsbys, also with similar length there. And when you have the grabby hangers that are on here that you have to lift up the guitar to extract it from the hanger itself, then you need to take that into consideration for the height as well. Step 2 is the board, or the slat wall stuff. Fascinatingly, there is a store here, and I'm sure in many other places as well, that sells this kind of stuff essentially pre-made. There's probably a number of these kinds of stores, but the one that was recommended to me and I ended up going to is called Shop for Shop, which is just awesome brand name, by the way. But I can see why they got recommended as they did, and that's because the service is fantastic. They knew exactly what I wanted, and they just got the pieces, and I just took it home. It was too easy, and that's this fantastic slat wall stuff. I'll show you some pictures on the screen here right now. I originally thought I'd be going for a full floor-to-ceiling type setup, like I've seen in many of the guitar shops. But then I realized I'd be creating a very shiny, reflective surface that would not be very nice for sound quality or my hearing for that matter. And so I ended up just taking a single row and putting a number of them on different walls around the place. And you can see I also got this aluminium edging that sits in the slat walls here that is quite stylish but also makes it stronger. Step 3 is the hangers, and I went on a major rabbit hole on this one. Going through the gazillion choices online took quite a bit of time. So on that, I'm not going to recommend one or the other to anyone. It's definitely 100% up to the individual and their requirements and their purposes when it comes to these ones. In my case here, I ended up going with the trusty Hercules brand. I've used a lot of their products in the past, and I admit I'm also extremely partial to their grabby technology that I mentioned earlier. However, to my bemusement, when I went to order these standard hangers that I've seen in every shop since the dawn of time, apparently they've stopped making them. And this is what they offer as a replacement, so to speak, today. Frankly, I didn't think these looked as sturdy, but I spoke to a number of colleagues I respect on this kind of thing, and I went and tried a couple out. And in reality, the functionality is exactly the same. It's just a little bit more lightweight and a bit less material. But in terms of strength, stability, and functionality, they're still the same. Still does strike me as a weird company decision to make, though. Such a popular product to discontinue randomly. Step 4, we're going to talk about the install a little bit and some notes that I took that I thought would be useful for others that might consider doing this exercise. As the saying goes, I said before, measure twice, do once. You don't want to have to repeat things or buy materials more than once. Install into something solid. I'm lucky, I've got bricks behind the wall here, but not everyone does, so make sure you plan that part out of it. Pre-drill the holes as much as you can. So pre-drill the holes into the board, pre-drill the holes into the wall, and of course you can use the holes in the board as a template to guide the holes, pilot holes, into the wall. Use good anchors and bolts. And of course, make sure you secure the anchors into the wall as well. A good idea is to put liquid nails or something like that in before you put the anchors, and so that it hardens around them and closes the space around the screws when you put them in there as well. So we installed a few of these around the house now, and I'm pretty happy. In fact, that's understating it quite substantially. I'm thrilled by the outcome. In case you're wondering, we quite thoroughly tested all of the slat walls. We've had 3 of us hanging off them, and it's the best part of 1/4 of a ton. So there's zero concerns about the integrity or strength of what we've built. Currently, I've got 10 guitars hanging on this wall behind me. With my measurements, I've worked out I can easily, if I make the spacing between them less and optimize the angle, I can easily get another 3 or 4 or more on there. You can see behind me, it obviously looks nice. Quite proud of that. And grabbing and putting the guitars back, super easy. It's fast, and it's certainly better than having them on the floor. So it's both pretty and practical. Speaking of pretty and practical, I want to make a special shout out to one of my best mates, Highlander, who came to help with the final bit of this installation. He's a serial entrepreneur, and I'll leave some links to some of the cool things he's doing down in the description. For the record, he was compensated handsomely for this work in Matzo's ginger beer. However, some of that may have been consumed during the construction of this project. And that's it for another random video. It was a fun project, but man, I'm glad it's over. I hope that someone found something useful out of all of that, and if not, perhaps some mild entertainment. If either of those apply, then you can do the obligatory click support stuff below. And with that, I'm out. Until next time.